thank you for the opportunity to talk about the International Environment Forum. I'm excited to tell you about it because I think that the IEF is a hidden treasure. I only heard about it in 2006, and as I told you right before, from Peter Adrians. And that was after many years of lonely efforts to work for environmental awareness and action. I was much encouraged to find people around the world that shared my Baha'i perspective on the environment. The IEF was launched in October 1997. Today, there are about 700 members and associates in 92 countries on all 5 continents. The IEF is a Baha'i-inspired professional organization and open to people of all faith traditions, as well as to scientists interested in applying ethical principles to environmental issues. It encourages dialogue and learning about the complex human and natural systems that is life on this planet. The IEF promotes both scientific knowledge and spiritual ethical teachings, which we both need to properly address the environmental crisis. Let me explain this a little more, taking climate change as an example. Since the Industrial Revolution, the Earth has warmed about 1.3 degrees. At the Paris Climate Conference in 2015, the nations of the world committed to keeping global warming well below 2 degrees. Representatives of small island states then pleaded for a 1.5 degrees Celsius warming because anything above that would mean the loss of their islands. Since then, despite voluntary plans by countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and despite widespread efforts toward energy efficiency and cleaner energy, carbon concentrations in the atmosphere have continued to rise. Scientists have been very clear that already a 1.5 degree warming is not safe. However, keeping the warming below 1.5 has now become extremely difficult because of the long-delayed necessary action. At this point, it is no longer realistic that we can limit the warming to 1.5 degrees. In the past years, scientists thought that if we temporarily overshoot 1.5 degrees and then reduce carbon concentrations, then temperatures would later go down to 1.5 degrees and we could avoid the worst consequences. However, a recent scientific report pointed out that it would be impossible to lower temperatures once they have gone beyond 1.5 degrees. Now, thanks to the Paris Climate Agreement, most countries developed plans to reduce their carbon emissions. If these goals are fully implemented, temperature rise would likely be limited to 2.6 degrees. However, their implementation is voluntary, and most countries are far from accomplishing their goals of reducing emissions. According to the recent UN emissions gap report, the current trajectory is a temperature rise of 3.1 degrees by the end of the century, if existing policies are fully implemented. A 3.1 degrees Celsius temperature rise would be catastrophic. At the present time, we have been experiencing the impacts of a global warming of 1.3 degrees Celsius, and they are severe. Heat waves are getting worse, storms are getting stronger, droughts and flooding are becoming more extreme, wildfires are becoming more devastating, and many people have already been forced to move away from their homes either because the climate does not support their agriculture anymore, or because of sea level rise and extreme weather events. Each little bit of warming makes a huge difference. The impacts on the climate system don't just increase linearly. They can grow exponentially. It is impossible to imagine a 3.1 degrees Celsius warmer world, or even a 2.6 degrees warmer world. And these are all projections for the end of the century. Of course, the warming will continue afterward. Moreover, there is the real danger of natural feedback loops that will reinforce the warming and which may likely be unstoppable. So, the big question is, why do humans not do everything in their power to limit global warming? Why do politicians not act? And why is there not sufficient support from the public to push for decisive climate action? There is a paralysis of will by all actors and on all levels. Countries put their own economic interests before the well-being of all of humanity. Big corporations and businesses put their short-term economic interest before the well-being of people and planet, and even of their own long-term economic interest. In the developed world, most people don't want to give up their wasteful lifestyles. And in the so-called developing countries, people feel they have the right to strive for the same standard of living as in the developed countries. In addition, there is widespread ignorance and even disinformation about the nature and scope of climate change. All this results in unwillingness to take strong action to reduce carbon pollution. Developed countries don't want to take responsibility for their historical carbon emissions and don't want to contribute their fair share to climate financing. So the next question is, how can these mental barriers of egotism and selfish economic interest be overcome? It does not seem to be possible without a fundamental shift in consciousness. The Universal House of Justice, the global governing institution of the Baha'i Faith, wrote, "The welfare of any segment of humanity is inextricably bound up with the welfare of the whole. Humanity's collective life suffers when any one group thinks of its own well-being in isolation from that of its neighbors, or pursues economic gain without regard for how the natural environment, which provides sustenance for all, is affected." Therefore, the prerequisites for meaningful climate action seem to be embracing the oneness of humankind and abandoning nationalism, working toward a just global governance that includes environmental governance, recognizing human interconnectedness with and dependence on the natural world, and readiness of people to be satisfied with less material things, to abandon consumerism, and find happiness in spiritual, social, and cultural activities. In other words, we are talking about spiritual development, which means focusing on the well-being of the community and not on the self. Baha'u'llah explained, "Let your vision be world-embracing rather than confined to your own self." True peace and tranquility will only be realized when every soul will have become the well-wisher of all mankind. Baha'u'llah pointed out the importance of this teaching, particularly for political leaders. O ye, the elected representatives of the people in every land, take ye counsel together, and let your concern be only for that which profiteth mankind, and bettereth the condition thereof. It behoveth them, however, to be trustworthy among his servants, and to regard themselves as the representatives of all that dwell on earth. Imagine if local government officials and national politicians would always have the well-being of all of humanity in mind and of the planetary ecosystem in mind when they make their decisions. We are facing a triple planetary crisis: climate change, loss of wild plants and animals, and pollution of all kinds, such as plastics and chemicals, etc. These environmental problems are intricately interconnected with humanity's social problems, such as inequality, the immense wealth of a few, and widespread poverty of many. Therefore, we need a holistic approach to address these problems. And ethical principles are essential for the fundamental social change we need for humankind to live in harmony with nature and with itself. Of course, spiritual and ethical principle need to be applied to the reality of our world. Therefore, knowledge of environmental issues and about the interconnectedness of life is equally important. Even well-intentioned people can act in a way that is harmful to the planet and other people if they lack the knowledge of the consequences of their actions. Religious conviction does not automatically translate into service to the common good. It is entirely possible, for example, to have a congregation of well-intentioned adherents whose actions do little to contribute to the betterment of society. Clearly, there is much to learn about how noble ideals become expressed in committed, sustained action. Therefore, the International Environment Forum promotes both knowledge and ethical principles, science and religion. In this manner, it applies the Baha'i teaching of the complementarity of science and religion. The IEF has two focus areas. A, contributing to public discourse on issues and concepts relevant to the environment and sustainability in the global political space and in the science-religion dialogue. B, empowering its members and associates to engage in discourse and social and environmental action by generating knowledge and providing information and resources. The International Environment Forum, as an organization, does not organize local projects, nor does it get involved with them, but members can use the IEF as a platform for sharing their experiences. So, what does the IEF do? On this slide, you can see IEF's major activities. I will now briefly explain some of these activities. The IEF website contains a wealth of resources. Think of it as being a large library with several thematic floors and different rooms on each floor. On this slide, you see the main choices on the top right. Home, about IEF, issues and discourse, and social action. I already clicked on issues and discourse to get to this page. So at the top in green, you see different rooms on this floor of the library. Issues, resources, BIC statements, compilations, United Nations, science, papers. When you click on any of these, you will find big bookshelves on each of these topics, which means a long list of links. For example, when you click on resources, you will see this page. These are all links to the various topics. The list continues when you scroll down the page. Since building human capacity is so essential, the IEF both develops its own learning materials and shares those prepared by others. Therefore, you will find study materials for adults and youth. This includes a course on sustainable development and another one on climate change. These courses work for study groups and for self-study. There is a youth page and a developing children's page. On other pages, you can find interfaith resources and information about international conferences on the environment, such as on climate change or biological diversity, and reports about Baha'i activities at such conferences. If you are interested, I can show you some of the IEF website after my presentation. The IEF also produces a monthly e-newsletter, which reports about IEF activities and reflects on environmental actions and discourse from a Baha'i perspective, and shares news about environmental science and interfaith activities. One of the major activities of the IEF is its annual conferences, which are often held in partnership with other organizations and events. The conferences may rotate between continents to give more members a chance to participate. More recently, they were held virtually. It may be interesting for you to know that in 2007, the IEF conference took place in person in Ottawa. It was my first IEF conference, and it was very exciting for me. The program focused on scientific realities and spiritual imperatives of climate change, and it was excellent. The conference was organized by the IEF in collaboration with the National Spiritual Assembly of Canada. And I think, Peter, you have been quite involved with the organization. Weren't you on the board, on the IEF board during that time? I think you were.
Yes, that's true. I also presented at that conference. It was just wonderful.
Yes, it was a great
conference.
Yeah. So, and the most recent conference took place this past September alongside the United Nations Summit of the Future. Its topic was a world-embracing vision for a sustainable future. The purpose was mainly to contribute Baha'i-inspired perspectives to the discourse of the Summit of the Future. For example, one event was developing a vision for global collaboration. It revolved around transforming global governance, which was relevant for the Summit of the Future, where a reform of the United Nations was discussed. Another event was entitled Building Futures in Communities. Panelists reported and reflected on various local projects aimed at enhancing environmental sustainability and human well-being. These initiatives included a reforestation project in Iceland, community gardening in Singapore and the United Arab Emirates, agricultural and environmental education in Colombia, and relief work following recent flooding in Brazil. They offered real-life experiences and insights related to Baha'i-inspired approaches for social action in environmental areas. While this event contributed to public discourse, it also served to share ideas and knowledge and to inspire IEF members and anyone who participated for similar actions. In addition to its annual conferences, the IEF contributes to events organized by its partners and participates in conferences and forums of the United Nations and other organizations. The IEF was accredited to the United Nations World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg in 2002 as a scientific and technological organization, and again to the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro in 2012, and the 2022 Stockholm Plus 50 International Meeting, and other relevant UN events. Thanks to the personal initiative of IEF member Kayla Basket, the IEF has presented online webinars on topics of current interest since late 2020. Many of these webinars were recorded and are available on the IEF YouTube page. You can also watch the recordings of all the recent conference events. All links are on the IEF website. The IEF youth team is an enthusiastic small group of youth. They met earlier this year, mainly for study purposes. Please spread the word among young people. The meetings are open to all youth. The IEF collaborates with like-minded organizations such as EBBF, Ethical Business Building the Future, and the Baha'i International Community. The US Baha'i Office of Public Affairs and the Wilmette Institute co-sponsored our recent conference. While the IEF is a virtual organization without legal status, it does operate according to statutes that define its purpose and organization. And it applies Baha'i principles of administration. A governing board is elected each year by the worldwide membership without nominations or campaigning, by e-voting, and during the General Assembly. The board guides the IEF and organizes its activities. It meets 4 to 5 times per year. As board members live in different countries, all meetings are virtual. They each consist of a written online consultation that can last 10 days to 3 weeks and a Zoom meeting. It just so happened that there was a Zoom meeting of the board this morning. I asked the members to pose for a picture for you so that you can see them. It's less abstract when you can see faces. The annual IEF General Assembly is an opportunity for the membership to review the activities of the past year, to consult on future activities, and make recommendations to the governing board. The IEF operates without a fund. It is entirely volunteer-run. The advantages of not having to raise and manage money far outweigh the disadvantage of limited human resources. The most important advantage is that membership is free and therefore accessible to everyone who is interested in and agrees with the IEF's Baha'i-inspired approach. How can you use the services of the IEF and how can you support it? There are several options. You can just use the resources on the IEF website, which are available to everyone. Or you can subscribe to the IEF newsletter. Or you can become a member or an associate. Associates have the same privileges as members. They receive the newsletter and invitations to activities, but they don't participate in the election of the IEF board. The IEF is grateful for all its volunteers around the world. Mike Semple in Switzerland manages the substantial technical aspects of maintaining a website. The newsletter is produced in collaboration with members in the US, Canada, China, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. The IEF also has a wonderful conference team. And Bill and Aaron Kelly, our hosts today, are editing the video recordings from the IEF conferences and webinars. Volunteers are always welcome in all the dimensions of IEF's work. Volunteering for the IEF is both a great service and an opportunity to build capacity and to learn new things. For example, I learned HTML coding for posting items on the IEF website. Later, I could use that skill when designing courses for the Wilmette Institute and for the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education in Iran. It is especially important to build capacity in younger IEF members. There are increasing opportunities for IEF activities, which requires more human resources. In addition, the current board members are not getting younger. It is important that an ever-growing number of volunteers understands how the IEF works. Some people already have professional skills with which they can assist the IEF, but most are learning on the job. So I thank you for your interest in the International Environment Forum.